1st, New Jersey and some other states got hit with the new tax plan, which eliminated the state and local tax deduction. And now we are being punished by the unwillingness of the federal government to invest in our infrastructure. The Gateway Tunnel project has been pushed to the bottom of the list, and some of the projects that we need funding for right here in Fair Lawn may not get funded anymore. Just yesterday, I was at an Economic Development Corporation meeting, and we discussed building a parking deck right here in this area to help alleviate some of our parking issues at this train station, which you may know is the second busiest train station on this line. People come from many towns to commute from Fair Lawn into New York City. We need help with our parking. The Community Development Block Grant funding has been eliminated. We rely on that money to pave our roads, to fix improvements in our town, our senior center. We are also investing in our water infrastructure, which is very costly. We need a federal government that is willing to partner with us and make real investments in local communities like Fair Lawn to improve our quality of life and grow our economy. We can't do it alone, and our residents can't afford to pay higher taxes to do what needs to get done. So without further ado, I'm so happy to introduce someone who cares very deeply about these issues, Senator Bob Menendez.
You know, after the 2016 election, many people asked me what issue that was before us could bring Republicans and Democrats the greatest opportunity for bipartisan collaboration with President Trump. And for me, that was an easy answer. It was infrastructure. As we often say, there are no Democratic roads or Republican bridges. The president talked a whole lot about the sorry state of our infrastructure throughout his campaign, and we know a thing or two about that here in New Jersey. Ask anyone who's been late to work because they're stuck in a traffic jam. Ask anyone who's missed an appointment due to a delayed train. Ask anyone, they'll tell you that America's infrastructure is in desperate need of modernization and repair. Now, many Democrats, myself included, hope that the president's rhetoric on the campaign trail meant that the days of underinvesting in our roads and railways, airports and tunnels, trains and mass transit systems were over. Turns out, we were wrong. The Republican Congress spent nearly all of last year on a crusade to take health care away from millions of Americans. And once they failed, they decided to spend the final weeks of 2017 ramming through a tax bill that robs New Jersey families of billions of dollars in tax deductions in order to cut taxes for big corporations and wealthy CEOs. They borrowed $1.5 trillion, or $2 trillion if you add the interest, in order to pass the Trump tax cuts. And then suddenly, the administration must have realized they didn't have any money left to spend on America's infrastructure. Their brazen hypocrisy continues to amaze me. They say we can't afford to build world-class schools, more reliable railways, and safer roads and bridges, but when it comes time to get the checkbook to help out ExxonMobil or the Koch brothers, suddenly the deficit hawks are nowhere to be found. The long-awaited Trump infrastructure plan reads like a list of broken campaign promises. He promised an unprecedented $1.5 trillion in investment in America's infrastructure. Well, the president's plan starts with $200 billion in new federal funding. And that may sound good until you realize that he is simultaneously proposing cuts of $240 billion from existing infrastructure programs. So we have $240 billion of existing infrastructure programs, but you're going to eliminate that and then in return offer only $200 billion. So they start with $40 billion less for infrastructure and just hope we don't ask where the rest of the $1.3 trillion went. The answer to that $1.3 trillion riddle is hidden under innocent-sounding phrases like leverage and attracting new revenue streams. So what do those words mean? They're just a fancy way to say you're going to pickpocket commuters who already pay taxes just to pad corporate profits. That's what President Trump's $1.3 trillion infrastructure plan is. A $1.3 trillion bill charged to commuters through more tolls, including tolls of parts of our interstate, for example, that don't have a toll on them right now, higher taxes, and fare increases. So for those of you keeping score, what we have here is a $40 billion cut to infrastructure plus a $1.3 trillion tax hike. It's a plan designed to shift even more infrastructure costs back to the states, municipalities, and everyday commuters who are already fed up. At this point, between the tax law that capped New Jersey's state and local tax deduction and an infrastructure plan that screws state governments and everyday commuters, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that President Trump has declared war on New Jersey. Shifting the federal responsibility for infrastructure to local communities doesn't solve the problem. The cost of repairing roads and rebuilding bridges doesn't just go away. Communities have to make up the cost, and they basically have three choices. One, they raise taxes, create new tolls or transit fares to cover those costs. Two, they cut funding elsewhere from critical efforts, whether it be schools or law enforcement. Or three, they ignore those costs and allow our roads and bridges to deteriorate further. None of those are solutions. What we need is a federal government that lives up to its responsibilities. Already about 3/4 of all infrastructure spending is done at the state and local level. 3/4. The federal government needs to be doing more, not less, especially given this plan doesn't even address our most urgent transportation challenges. The numbers are so big, it can be hard to get it in your head, but more than $800 billion in unmet maintenance needs from our roads and bridges, $90 billion for aging transit systems. These aren't even the numbers needed to build world-class 21st century infrastructure. It's just the cost of fixing what we already have. But even if the numbers feel abstract, we feel the impact every day. Americans spend nearly 7 billion hours sitting in traffic collectively every year. That's time that could be spent with kids around the breakfast table. That's products stuck in traffic and fewer goods getting to customers. Every year, New Jersey drivers pay about $2,600 out of their pockets due to these inefficiencies. And for our economy as a whole, road congestion wastes more than 3 billion gallons of fuel every year, to the tune of $160 billion. Not to mention the environmental impact of more pollution, or the price we pay when 40,000 people tragically die on our roadways each year. Sadly, many of these deaths are preventable through better design, through modern engineering, through more effective safety practices. All of these problems are the results of years of underinvestment for America's infrastructure. Now, President Trump promised change. He said he would make America great again, but instead of providing real leadership, he's decided to make New Jerseyans pay again. His plan includes no dedicated funds for highway safety, no funding to fix our deficient bridges or our aging transit systems, no funding for life-saving technology like positive train control, no funding to build the livable, walkable communities we need to attract young workers and allow our seniors to stay in the communities they built their lives around. These challenges represent huge opportunities to create millions of new American jobs in everything from construction to engineering to city planning and resource management. The bottom line is we can't afford the status quo, not when major economic competitors like China and India are investing more money than ever before in building the 21st century infrastructure in their countries. If we want our businesses to be able to compete abroad, we need world-class infrastructure here at home. The President's plan is an insult to the traveling public. It's a one-way ticket to more delays, more tolls, and more money out of the pockets of commuters. It sends a message from the White House to every New Jerseyan sick of sitting in traffic or waiting on a crowded platform for a late train. Suck it up, give us your money, and get used to it. So we're here today to make it clear that this plan isn't going anywhere. That doesn't mean that we can't have a bipartisan effort on infrastructure. In fact, the last infrastructure bill that Congress passed earned 83 votes in the Senate. And I'm proud to have helped secure record highway funding and record transit funding for New Jersey as the senior Democrat on the Mass Transit Subcommittee. Today, Senate Democrats have proposed a $1 trillion plan. That would be a good start. It would actually invest $1 trillion. It's a job-creating plan that focuses on our most urgent needs, including $210 billion to upgrade roads and bridges, $110 billion to make our drinking water safe, and $180 billion for transit. The plan also invests in infrastructure at large, including our schools, our national parks, and our electric grid. This plan is one we can pay for if we get our priorities straight. I'd start by repealing the tens of billions of dollars of wasteful subsidies we give to oil, gas, and coal companies, or repurposing the repatriation of foreign profits abroad that get taxed when they be brought to the United States, specifically for an infrastructure bank, or looking at some of the amounts of monies that we should raise to the extent that we are permitting on federal lands and waters the drilling of oil and natural gas. We're giving it away instead of the royalties that should be paid. The consequences of inaction are far too high. If we want to compete in the 21st century, we need to think big and to get the job done.
This week we received the president's infrastructure plan, which can only be described as sheer idiocy. It is bad for the Northeast. It is bad for New Jersey. The priorities are upside down. Instead of allocating resources based on public need and public benefit, as the senator indicated, it gives priority to those projects that can attract private funds or funds from state and local government. And I think, as we all know, state and local government in New Jersey is tapped out. And there is no better example of this misguided approach than the Trump administration's low priority given to the Gateway Project. And so what we need are people in Washington like Senator Menendez, Senator Booker, and our congressional delegation fighting for us to get some common sense in this Trump administration and get the resources we need. I want to assure the senator that he has the full bipartisan support of the New Jersey legislature in this, and we will do whatever we can to support your efforts. And thank you for everything you've done in the past.